Well, good morning. I'm going to tell you what, the song selection this morning has just been off the chart for me. I'll tell you, some of my absolute favorites and led so well and sung so beautifully. It's been got a good crowd this morning. It's not like everybody was singing out and really just enjoying being together and praising God and glorifying Him this morning. So this morning, I want to tell you about when I was in the construction business and I would open up a set of blueprints that had been drawn by a professional architect, had been approved by an engineering firm, and everything was all set and they were all perfect, except for down in the bottom right corner where the stamp was. There was this little disclaimer, and it said, field conditions may vary. Which means this looks good on paper. Y'all, there are a lot of things that look good on paper. A lot of plans that are made that look good on paper. Or you think it through and you consider every possible scenario and every possible outcome. And you think your plan is perfect. And then the next thing you know, you realize your plan is not perfect. And as I think about that, I have to go back to Genesis chapter 1. Y'all, where God just spoke the world into existence. And how incredible that moment in time was when God said, let there be, and there was. And then it says there at the end of chapter 1, it says that then God looked back on everything He had done and saw that it was good. You know, what a great planner. What a great plan He had to create this world and its beauty. Can you imagine what day 6 must have looked like? To be there and to just witness this earth in its beauty and its perfection, the way God designed it, planned it, and created it, as perfect as it could be. But then what happened? We got involved. Now we got involved, and then God's plan that was perfect and perfectly executed was a little messed up by us. Even to the point in chapter 6 where it says God looked on what He had created and was sorry that He'd created it, because people were thinking about evil all the time. So God came up with another plan. He's going to cleanse this creation that He had made, and He's going to start over again. And so He does, and that goes along pretty well for a while. But then we come to chapter 11, and people got all puffy. And they got all full of themselves and got this big idea and made a plan. They made a plan that they were going to build this huge tower, and that the plan was they were going to glory in this tower and show their incredible aptitude for whatever it was they were trying to accomplish. But God had a different plan. And God, if you remember the story, said, let's go down there and let's confuse these folks and not let them complete this tower. And that's exactly what happened in chapter 11 of Genesis. God's plan was a little bit better than ours. And y'all, if you look on every page of this book, you will find that God's plan is always immensely better than ours. There's no comparison to God's plan and ours, because His leads to perfection and ours leads to destruction. I like God's plan better. I'm just going to tell you, I like God's plan better. So why then, church, if we like God's plan better, then do we follow sometimes our own plan? Does that make it? I wonder about that sometimes. You know, we look at God's plan and think, man, this is just this is incredible. Look at what he's written, look at what he's done, look at all. And then we go about and we make our own plan, and it's just a mess. It's just a mess. If you remember back in Genesis 12, God came to Abram and said, what I'm going to do for you? I'm going to make you a great nation. The entire world is going to be blessed by your offspring, by your people. The entire world is going to thrive and be great because of the plan I have for you. Well, see, God had it all worked out. And then just not long after that, Sarah comes along and says, you know what, I don't have any kids for you. And I'm not going to have any kids for you. So why don't you take my servant and you can create some offspring, some lineage through her. And we all know that turned out to be a mess. Because they'd not just been patient just for a little while and let God's plan play out. Because they had not just waited and seen that this perfect plan that God had when He said, I promise you. And God is not going to make us a promise that He doesn't keep. Good or bad. God is going to keep His promises. So when He says to Abram, I promise you that the world is going to be blessed through you, could they just not have accepted God's perfect plan and gone with that? But oh no. We got to get in here and get our hands in it and mess it all up and completely destroy the whole plan because we want to do it our way. We can make plans that seem perfect. How many of you have a daughter that has gotten married? Now, there's planning that creates a whole different set of circumstances. Months and months of planning go into a single afternoon. And I always, when we're counseling with young couples and they're talking about the wedding, I say, look, here's the deal. You can plan all you want to. You can make sure that every detail is perfect. But here's the thing. If every detail falls completely apart, at the end of the day, if you say I do and you say I do, and I say I now pronounce you, you are just as married either way. So the plans may crumble or they may be perfect, but the end result is the same. But don't we get wrapped up, friends, don't we get wrapped up in making our plans? I have an idea of what I think things should be like, and that's what I go with. Over in 1 Chronicles, chapter 17, there's a beautiful story over there where David is talking to Nathan, and he comes to this realization. And he says in verse 1 of chapter 17 of 1 Chronicles, he says, now it came to pass when David was dwelling in his house that David said to Nathan the prophet, see, I dwell in a house of cedar, but the ark of the covenant of the Lord is under tent curtains. Then Nathan said to David, do all that is in your heart, for God is with you. Can you see the wheels turning in David's mind now? Look, I live in this fine house. I have this nice permanent house of cedar. It's beautiful. But God's covenant, God's ark of the covenant, his dwelling place with us on earth lives in a tent. That doesn't make any sense. So Nathan says, well, obviously knew what David was thinking, so just go do it. So David has in his heart these plans to build the temple, and he's gathering everything up he needs to do it. And God says, whoa, hold on a minute. I know what your plan is, and I appreciate that plan, but here's the deal. You're not going to build my house for me because you have shed much blood because you're a man of war. Your son Solomon is going to build my house. Look at what happens over here in verse, say 11 of 17. And it shall be, when your days are fulfilled, when you must go to be with your fathers, that I will set up your seed after you, who will be of your sons, and I will establish his kingdom. He shall build me a house, and I will establish his throne forever. I will be his father, and he shall be my son. I will not take my mercy away from him, as I took it away from him who was before you. And I will establish him in my house and in my kingdom forever, and his throne shall be established forever. So at least David knows that even though his plans didn't come to pass, that his family, his son, is going to be on the throne forever, and that his temple, that God's temple, will be built by Solomon. But now listen to this. Over in chapter 22 of 1 Chronicles, David is getting things ready. He's preparing things for the building of the temple, making plans and getting everything together. And in verse 14 he says, "Indeed, I have taken much trouble to prepare for the house of the Lord 100,000 talents of gold and 1,000,000 talents of silver and bronze and iron beyond measure, for it's so abundant. And I have prepared timber and stone also, and you may add to them. Moreover, there are workmen with you in abundance, woodsmen and stone cutters and all types of skillful men for every kind of work, of gold and silver and bronze and iron. There is no limit. Arise and begin working, and the Lord will be with you." Just pause at that verse just for a moment. Arise and begin working, and the Lord will be with you. Now remember, God gave the instructions for the construction of the temple. It was very important that those instructions be followed. Otherwise, God would not have been pleased with the temple and then not have moved in to dwell there and make it his home. But if we look at what it says there, when he says, "Arise and begin working, and the Lord will be with you," that is a strong admonition. Don't just think about it. Don't just talk about it. Don't just plan it and then move on to something else. But get up and get to work and do something, and the Lord will be with you. And David also commanded all the leaders of Israel to help Solomon his son, saying, "Is not the Lord your God with you? Has he not given you rest on every side? For he has given the inhabitants of the land into my hand, and the land is subdued before the Lord and before his people. Now set your heart and your soul to seek the Lord your God. Therefore arise and build the sanctuary of the Lord God, to bring the ark of the covenant of the Lord and the holy articles of God into the house that is to be built for the name of the Lord." Set your heart and your soul to seek the Lord. Arise and build the sanctuary. Arise and build the house. Arise and build God a place to live among people. And we know that's talking about the physical temple in the old law, but we also know that we are now the temple, and that it's our job, it's our responsibility, church, it's our privilege to present this temple to God in perfection, to allow him to live there and dwell in us, so that we can be the place where God and man intersect. It's no longer in a building somewhere in Jerusalem. It is right here inside of each of us, where we have the opportunity to have God and man dwell together. So arise and build the sanctuary. So David, in verse 28 of 1 Chronicles, chapter 28 of 1 Chronicles, I keep saying verses. He gets everybody together, all his stewards, all his men of valor, all his leaders, all his captains. David rises to his feet and he says, "Hear me, my brethren and my people. I had it in my heart to build a house of rest for the ark of the covenant of the Lord and for the footstool of our God. and had made preparations to do it. But God said to me, you shall not build a house for my name, because you have been a man of war and have shed blood. See, David had a plan. As a matter of fact, if you look back a little bit in a couple chapters earlier, it says that David gave Solomon the plans for the temple and instructed him on how it should be built. And so everything was in place. All the materials were there. All the laborers were there. All the plans were there. Everything was in place. And then God says, but David, you are not going to build it. Your son is. But God had a plan. I had a plan. How many times, church, have we had a plan? And it didn't work out. And I'm just going to tell you, folks, there are many times that I've had plans and I look back on them when they didn't work out and I thought, man, why didn't that work? And as I look back with more maturity and clearer vision, I can see, oh, God had that all figured out before I made that plan. And His plan was much, much better than mine. And I'm thankful. Every day of my life, I'm thankful that many of my plans did not work. Knowing that God's plan always does. So look at this. After David addresses the people in general, he turns to Solomon. And he says, as for you, my son Solomon, know the God of your father and serve Him with a loyal heart and a willing mind. For the Lord searches all hearts and understands all the intent of the thoughts. If you seek Him, He will be found by you. But if you forsake Him, He will cast you off forever. Consider now, for the Lord has chosen you to build a house for the sanctuary, so be strong and do it. The Lord has chosen you to build a house for His sanctuary. The Lord has chosen you, church, to be His temple, to build yourself into a temple for Him to place His Spirit into. So be strong and do it. So build it. Not necessarily only individually. And now I'm asking you, church, I'm asking you individually to build that place in your heart for God to put His Spirit and let His Spirit fill you in that location. But church, I'm asking you collectively, as a body, build this temple for God together. Unified in love, and unified in hope, and unified in promise. And moving forward from here, from today and looking ahead, use every moment of time that you have to build yourself into a temple for God and to follow His plan. Because church, we can look. It's all through here. Our plans are junk. Our plans are worthless. Our plans are hopeless. But God's plans are nothing but hope, and nothing but promise, and nothing but perfect. See, God had a plan. Listen now. God has a plan. And y'all, it's a perfect plan. And the plan is for us to spend eternity with Him in heaven. And that is a perfect plan. because He sent His perfect Son as the perfect sacrifice to redeem us from our imperfections and to free us up from our baggage of sin that we carry along with us. His plan, church, His plan is perfect, for God sent His Son into the world to save the world. His perfect Son in a perfect plan. And again, where does that get messed up? Right here. Right here. The plan that God has for you, church, is perfect. The plan that God has for this church is perfect. Just let God's plan work. Just let it work. You know, several months ago, Mark and Tom and I, we talked a lot about, where do we want the church to go, what kind of plans we want to make. And we realized there was this moment in time in our discussion. It was like, wait a minute, what are we talking about? We're saying we want to plan to do this and plan to do that, and then we'll pray, God, please help us fulfill, these plans. And no, we realize that is a completely backwards approach to doing it. Say, God, here, you show us. You give us the wisdom and the discernment to receive your plan and to recognize your plan. And then, Father, give us the strength to act on that. Don't let us make a plan and bless it, but bless us as we follow your plan. Because our plans, again, they just don't work. But God's plan always does. And I'm thankful for that. There was a moment in Isaiah chapter 6 where Isaiah has a vision. And the vision is this moment in time when he is in the presence of God. And God says, in verse 8, He says, who will go? Who can I send? Remember what Isaiah said? Here I am. Send me. And as plans change and circumstances are different from what we think, what we have to say at that moment is, God, here I am. Send me. Whether it fits our plan or not, whether it's something that we anticipated or not, our job, our privilege is to say to God, here I am. I'll go. So as we close today, I want to encourage you to serve God with a loyal heart and a willing mind. And when it comes to building the temple, a place for Him to dwell, be strong and do it. When it comes to seeking Him, seek Him and He will be found by you. And when He says, go, say, God, here I am. Send me. Whatever you want. Let my plans be in line with yours. Let your plans guide my life. Whether I understand them or not, whether I agree with them or not. Can you imagine what it must have been like for Abraham and for God to say, get your stuff, get out, go. Where? Did Abraham question? He just went, didn't he? How hard is that sometimes just to in blind faith just trust God's plan. So church, be strong and do it. And the plan that God has for you for eternity through Jesus Christ, His Son, the perfect sacrificial lamb given so that you can go to heaven. and so that I can go to heaven, so that we as individuals can go to heaven to spend eternity with God there. What a plan. Don't mess that plan up. Love you all. I'm going to see you in heaven one of these days. I know it. Y'all, let's stand and sing.